Welcome to the Zen Studies podcast. I'm Domio Burke. Thanks to new members of the podcast who make my work possible through their one-time or recurring donations. Robert from Seaside, Oregon. Leo from Washington Borough, Pennsylvania. Jane from Mangrove Mountain in Australia. And Ross from Homer, Alaska. It's so much fun to think of all of you listening in your various corners of the world. So I'm calling today's episode, Seijo's Soul is Separated, Waking Up from Alienation from Ourselves. There are countless ways in which we can feel inwardly divided or somehow alienated from our true self. So case 35 of the Mumonkan or Gateless Gate koan collection addresses this matter with a pointed question about Seijo, the character in a traditional Chinese story that I will end up telling, who ends up living parallel lives. The koan asks, which one is the true Seijo? And naturally, the Zen answer is both and neither. So here's case 35 of the Mumonkan, this translation by Koun Yamada Roshi. Goso asked a monk, Seijo and her soul are separated. Which one is the true Seijo? So Goso is the teacher, and this question, obviously, is his challenge to the monk. The story behind this koan is an old Chinese legend from the Tang period. The story of a girl, Zhou, named Sei. Seijo and a young man named Ochu fell in love, but Seijo's father, Chokan, arranged for her to marry someone else. Heartbroken, Ochu left town in a small boat. As he rowed away, though, he saw Seijo running after him along the riverbank, and the two ran off together. They married, had 2 children, and lived happily. Over time, however, Seijo began thinking about how her father must miss her, because she loved her own children so much. So she and Ochu decided to return home and ask forgiveness for leaving and try to repair the relationship. When they arrived, Ochu went ahead to explain everything to Seijo's father. But Chokan was incredulous. Seijo, he said, had never left. Since the day Ochu departed, she had been lying comatose in bed. Then, as they're standing there talking, the Seijo who had traveled with Ochu approached the comatose Seijo, and when the two met, they became one again. So that's the folk legend behind this koan question. Which one is the true Seijo? We might be inclined to say that the true Seijo is the one who followed her bliss, the one who followed her love and, because of her circumstances, had to separate from her body to do so. Or perhaps the part of her that pursued her own desires was separated from her soul, which stayed home. And maybe that's why, even though she was living happily with Ochu in a foreign land, she felt divided and needed to return home, to return to her body or her soul. So what matters here is how this story calls to mind the ways we become alienated from ourselves and our lives. Sometimes the split is between mind and body. Sometimes it's between the heart, if you will, our sense of authenticity and love, and the defensiveness, anxiety, and habits that keep us feeling and acting as if we're separate and unsafe. Our sense of inward dividedness may be due to the apparent tension between our sincere aspiration to practice and our desire for worldly things, to experience, acquire, get involved, stay busy. Maybe our sense of separation shows up when we lose touch with our appreciation for silence and stillness. Maybe we touch that stillness when we're sitting zazen, on retreat, or out in nature. Then we return to ordinary activity, driven by necessity and compulsion and hurry, anxiety and habit. We may also experience, say, insight into our life and behavior, but then fail to integrate or embody it. If you've been practicing for any length of time, you've probably had some kind of realization. Oh, I don't have to do that. Or I could choose to be like this. Or I could let this go. And as you experience the insight, there can be a feeling of great relief. And internally you might think, great, from now on, everything will be different. But then, even though part of you knows better, you find yourself pulled back into the same patterns. So there are many other experiences of duality, tension, inner conflict, and alienation that arise in our lives. So who are you really? I think we tend to identify with whatever aspect of ourselves we judge to be better. We might think, well, I'm the peaceful, wise one, the one who gets caught up in karma? I don't know who that is. We realize that the one who gets caught up is connected to us somehow, but it's more of a burden than an us. Alternatively, of course, you may identify with the one who gets caught up in karma and therefore dwell in shame or frustration. And yet, who is the one who aspires to become more liberated? So who are you really? When the Buddha explained the truth of anatta, or not self, he said something I've always loved. In the Anatta Lakkhana Sutta, he says that if something were truly self, we should be able to say, may it be like this, may it not be like that. And then whatever we've willed would come about. If the body were self, we should be able to say, may it be comfortable, may it not be painful, and it would be thus. If our thoughts were self, we could say, may my thoughts subside, may I not have those thoughts, and immediately it would be so. The same can be true, said to be true, of our feelings, sensations, perceptions, will, consciousness, all the other aspects of our being that we might identify with. Clearly, none of these things are completely under our control. None of them are fully graspable. Am I my body, thoughts, feelings, emotions, opinions, motivations, desires, preferences, personality, relationships, job, possessions, ability to reason, my compassion, my knowledge, anything we can think of as me changes. All of it is ultimately ungraspable. I mean, in a sense, these things are real, but when we look closely and try to locate and define them, we find they have no fixed form, no fixed existence. Eventually, everything we usually identify as self or belonging to self, we will lose. This is why so many koans ask about our true nature. Who are you really? Again and again, a teacher is essentially asking the student this question: who are you? And the teacher asks you to respond from who you truly are, not from what you think or what you remember or what you believe you should say. And this isn't easy. It's not straightforward. This is responding to the fundamental Zen question. If someone thinks they've settled the matter of who they truly are without conscious spiritual practice, their answer is probably fairly superficial. Many people might say, I know who I am, and that's fine. It's not our job to prove that other people don't know who they are. But often, when we look closely at self or others, we see a kind of defensiveness and rigidity around identity. This is who I am. I don't want it questioned. I don't want it changed. I don't want it challenged. It shouldn't be easy to say who we really are. Part of practice is learning to tolerate and make our peace with the discomfort we experience when we admit we aren't really sure who we are. The first thing we have to do is let go of the idea that we should know. Our culture tells us that once we're adults, 18, maybe 21 years old, maybe we have our 20s to mess around, but certainly by 30, we should have ourselves figured out. We're supposed to have it together, to be an adult. If we're worthy of respect, we should be able to give a confident answer. Yes, I know who I am. Stake out our territory, stand up for ourselves, and try to avoid being humiliated. But we can't become intimate with our true nature unless we explore not knowing with great courage and curiosity. In those koans where the master says, "Give me an answer," and the monk remains silent, it's not because the monk is stupid. Their silence is actually a sign of wisdom. The monk knows what not to reach for. They know they can't simply parrot a teaching or try to be clever or force some bold response. So they remain silent because they do not yet know what or where to speak from. Few of us would have the courage to investigate this question, to open ourselves up to it, without the encouragement of the Dharma ancestors. Common sense and culture say, why are you asking yourself that? That's ridiculous. You know who you are. But the Dharma ancestors tell you to keep looking. They tell you that you can find yourself, that you can reunite the apparently divided parts of yourself. And nothing is sweeter or more liberating than recognizing your true nature. And you have to investigate this for yourself. Listening to descriptions of what your true nature is like can only take you so far. You won't realize it that way. You have to wander the inner halls of your own body-mind, your own quandary, searching and inquiring, testing and questioning. However, the teachings can inspire us and help us avoid certain pitfalls, or at least recognize when we've fallen into one. So this is Mumon's commentary on the koan of Seijo Is Separated from Her Soul. Quote, "If you realize the true one in this, you will understand that getting out of one shell and entering another is just like a traveler staying at an inn. If you have not realized it, don't rush about wildly. When earth, water, fire, and wind are suddenly about to decompose, you will be like a crab which has fallen into boiling water and is struggling with its 7 arms and 8 legs. At that time, don't say I didn't warn you." End quote. So when earth, water, fire, and wind are suddenly about to decompose is apparently referring to our time of death. And Mumon's comments are a little grim, but shifting the emphasis away from his warning, we can hear the teaching. If you realize the true one, you will understand that getting out of one shell and entering another is like a traveler staying at an inn. What is always present through all of your states and changes? Through all your circumstances, responses, experiences? What is it that gets out of one shell and enters another? So that Seijo lying comatose at home and Seijo running off to follow her dreams are both expressions of the same traveler. What animates them? What lives in both or through both? Another way of asking this question about your true nature appears in a different koan. What is your face before your parents were born? That question strips away everything: your body, your personality, your circumstances. So what is your face? What is your nature apart from all of that? And yet, as Dogen says, it is never apart from this very place. So you don't find it elsewhere either. If you think you have found it, allow your conviction to be tested. It's best to humbly allow any shallow understanding to be revealed, because it's easy to stop partway, to find some solace in the Dharma, to reach some level of self-acceptance, and, lose much of your inspiration for practice. Now, certainly one of the wonderful gifts of practice is that after a while, we can learn to accept and make peace with who we are and what our circumstances are. We can stop struggling so much, stop judging ourselves so harshly. All of that is lovely. But it's not waking up from any hint of alienation from ourselves. And though we may have some sense of it, knowing our true nature is not some all or nothing matter. Glimpses and intuitions are valuable, and our faith can grow. But even once you've seen fairly clearly, that faith must still be deepened. So your true nature is not found anywhere else but in this manifestation, this being, this place. And yet, it's not limited to this being. What is it? In his poem, Song of the Grass Roof Hermitage, Chan Master Shi To calls the ephemeral structure we have created as a self a grass hut. He says, in this translation by Taigen Dan Layton, quote, "If you want to know the undying person in the hut, don't separate from this skin bag here and now." End quote. The undying person in the hut. And my Dharma grandmother, Roshi Kennett, called it the Lord of the House. And these metaphors may summon up an idea that we have some kind of immortal soul that will survive our physical death. But really, that's just a hope that this grass hut will endure forever. And then misses the undying person who cannot die because they've never been born. Alternatively, we may imagine the Lord of the House is some kind of holy inner conscience who often loses control over its minions. But that once again introduces a potential for division and alienation between a true self and a self that flagrantly disregards the one who knows better. Yet any self we can imagine is just an in. And what we're looking to recognize is the traveler. And just remember that the traveler cannot be grasped. And the one looking to recognize is also the traveler. In a moment of recognition, your divided soul becomes one, and no part of you is not it. But you don't get to carry that moment around with you. Your job is to continually strengthen your faith in your true nature. So to close, here is the verse associated with this koan by Mumonkan. Quote, "The clouds and the moon are the same. Valleys and mountains are different from each other. All are blessed, 10,000 times blessed. Is this one? Is this two?" End quote. In his commentary, Yamada explained that the clouds and the moon appear to be two different things, but they're actually the same. And then valleys and mountains are relative to each other, and yet they are different. And I have written my own poem in response and conclusion. Busyness and stillness, delusion and enlightenment. Everything part of a single luminous whole. Yet no one else inhabits this body-mind as I work my way through my daily to-do list. Oh, the relief of the ugly duckling who realizes their swan nature and knows there was no other way they were supposed to be. Still a mystery. Still a mystery. That's it for today. I'll be back as soon as I can with a new episode. I hope you'll tune in. Thanks for listening.